My jealous stepdaughter secretly gave me peanuts during her honeymoon, knowing about my severe allergy. This sent me to the ER. Now, she's panicking and threatening to drop out of college because her dad cut her off financially for pulling such a cruel prank. I, 44F, recently married my boyfriend of 4 years, Jeff, 48M. He has an 18-year-old daughter, Addison, from his previous marriage. Despite my efforts, Addison has never liked me, and I'm not sure why. Jeff and I met through mutual friends about 4 years ago. They thought we'd be a good match, and they were right. I had been married before, but my ex-husband and I amicably divorced 5 years ago. We realized we had grown apart and were more like friends than partners, so we mutually decided to end the marriage. Although we parted on good terms, we are no longer in touch. Jeff was also married before, but sadly, his wife passed away when Addison was 7 years old. After that, Jeff had a few relationships, but none were serious. Both of us had been single for a long time when our mutual friends decided to set us up. We're really thankful they did because it turned out to be the best decision of our lives. Our relationship has been smooth, with only the usual minor issues. We get along well, understand each other deeply, and share a strong bond. The only challenge in our relationship has been Jeff's daughter, Addison. While I don't have a problem with her, I've always sensed that she doesn't like me and believes her father deserves someone better. I understand that it's normal for her to think highly of her dad, and I respect that. However, the way she expresses it, by giving me strange looks, making snide comments, and generally making me feel uncomfortable, doesn't seem like the best way to show her appreciation for him. In the beginning of our relationship, I did discuss Addison's behavior with Jeff and asked if she had acted this way with his previous girlfriends. As I suspected, he confirmed that her behavior was consistent with how she treated other women he dated. Jeff had been trying to address this with her, hoping to stop the conflicts that often led to breakups. He was frustrated because, ultimately, he always prioritized his daughter, which meant his relationships with his partners usually ended. He explained that he couldn't change the situation, as Addison had refused to mature, especially after losing her mother at a young age. Understanding her difficult past, I decided to be compassionate and overlook her behavior. I was determined to focus on my relationship with Jeff, so her actions didn't bother me much. Since she was already 14 when we started dating, I figured her behavior was just part of the typical teenage phase. I had no children of my own, but I knew from stories that teenagers often go through rough patches. I believed that, with time, she would grow out of it. I wasn't about to get into a drama with a 14-year-old, so I chose to ignore her odd behavior and focus on building my relationship with Jeff. Last year, Addison went away to college, and by then, her behavior had noticeably changed. She no longer gave me strange looks or tried to undermine me. After 2 years of us being together, it seemed like we had reached an unspoken agreement. She realized that her attempts to drive me away, as she had with Jeff's previous girlfriends, were futile. We found a place of mutual respect. She stopped picking on me, and I remained unaffected. Jeff proposed to me after Addison left for college, and we had a small, intimate wedding. Addison attended, and while I expected some resistance or discomfort from her, she seemed quite okay with everything. Her demeanor at the wedding made me think she was finally warming up to me. In hindsight, I should have been more cautious and not let my guard down so easily because that kindness at the wedding turned out to be deceiving. It cost me more than I anticipated. I had started to believe Addison was finally warming up to me. When she asked if she could join us on our honeymoon, I considered it carefully and discussed it with Jeff, who was also on board. It's important to clarify that I didn't just naively agree to let my adult stepdaughter, who had previously disliked me, come along on our honeymoon. Jeff and I had planned to go to Egypt, inspired by one of our favorite novels and because of its rich history and stunning scenery. Addison, a history major, expressed interest in joining us, seeing Egypt as the perfect destination for her studies. Given its cultural and historical significance, we agreed, not wanting to deny her the opportunity. She asked us 3 weeks before our departure, and it took us a week to decide. When we informed her she could join us, she was ecstatic, and I was the one who broke the news, which made her very grateful. I was looking forward to bonding with her on the trip, hoping we could set aside our past differences and start fresh. I planned to bring this up during the trip to ensure we all had a great time together. Jeff and I are committed to being together for life, and I wanted to resolve any lingering issues with Addison. Addison was still in college and had returned home for our wedding, not wanting to miss more classes, especially since she was joining us on the honeymoon. She came back just hours before our flight, so everything was quite rushed, and I didn't get much chance to talk to her or interact with her. We were all preoccupied with making sure we caught our flight on time, and I didn't notice anything unusual in her behavior, nor could I have predicted what was about to happen. The journey went smoothly upon landing. Our departure and the flight itself were uneventful. After arriving in Egypt, we took a cab to the hotel. We were all exhausted, particularly Addison, who had been traveling all day, so we decided to rest before heading out in the evening. We had agreed to stay at the same hotel, but Addison would have a separate room on a different floor, allowing Jeff and me to enjoy our honeymoon without interruptions. I thought our arrangement was fair, considering we had allowed Addison to join us. Jeff was napping in our room when I was woken up about an hour after we arrived at the hotel. Addison called me, saying she wanted to go out for lunch. Since she hadn't eaten properly on the flight and wanted some company, I agreed. She invited me to her room, saying she had ordered something special for us to eat. It seemed kind and thoughtful, so I accepted and we started chatting. Everything seemed normal. When the food arrived, I was hesitant to try the dessert because it looked odd and messy. The delivery person said it was made according to Addison's instructions. She mentioned it was a traditional Egyptian dessert she had read about online. I can't recall the name, but it was unfamiliar to me. Not wanting to offend her, I decided to try it, which turned out to be a grave mistake. The next thing I knew, I was in the ER with the worst allergic reaction I'd had in 10 years. It turns out Addison had specifically requested a lot of peanut butter in the dessert, despite knowing my severe allergy. She had also instructed them to use vanilla ice cream and dates to mask the smell of the peanut butter. I hadn't smelled the dish before I took a few bites, not suspecting anything wrong. That was all it took for me to have a severe reaction. My throat closed up and breathing became incredibly difficult, which made me realize something was very wrong with the dessert. I was alone in the room with Addison, and though I knew she had issues, I couldn't believe she would let me die. I yelled at her to bring me my EpiPen from our room. Thankfully, she quickly understood the severity of the situation. She called the receptionist to get an ambulance and alerted Jeff to the emergency. After that, everything became a blur as I struggled to breathe. I was rushed to the nearest hospital, where I was treated in the ER. This happened 3 days ago, and I'm still in shock over what transpired. Jeff and I are still in Egypt, but Addison has been sent home. After being discharged from the hospital, I returned to the hotel and recounted the entire incident to Jeff. All he knew was what he had learned from the hotel staff, that Addison had ordered a dessert loaded with peanut butter, which she served to me. They discovered I was rushed to the ER due to a severe allergic reaction. The hotel staff made it clear that they had no prior knowledge of my peanut allergy and were simply following the instructions provided to them. They apologized for the incident, even though it wasn't their fault. Jeff had a serious conversation with Addison about what had happened. She was visibly scared, and Jeff had yelled at her while I was in the hospital. She refused to say anything in response. The amount of peanut butter I had consumed was so high that they had to keep me overnight for observation to ensure no additional symptoms or reactions occurred. The next morning, Jeff, Addison, and I returned to the hotel, and she remained silent for the rest of her stay. When we returned to the hotel, I explained everything that had happened to Jeff while Addison stayed in her room. After hearing me out, he was furious and went straight to Addison's room. He was there for about 2 hours, and when he returned, he informed me that he was sending Addison home on the next flight. She didn't argue because she knew her actions had been incredibly dangerous and could have killed me. She had no defense and accepted her punishment without protest. Jeff also told me that he had told Addison she would no longer receive any allowances from him. He would still cover her college tuition as he had already committed to that, but she would need to manage her other expenses on her own. He was done cleaning up after her and wanted her to learn how to be a decent person. I found his decision fair, and even if I had reservations, it wasn't my place to change it. It was between Jeff and his daughter. After our discussion, I didn't bring up anything about Addison again because I wanted to enjoy the rest of our honeymoon. Rehashing the situation wouldn't change the facts. However, Addison wasn't happy with Jeff's decision to cut off her funds. Instead of confronting him, she began reaching out to me. She sent multiple emails, claiming she had only intended to prank me and had forgotten about my peanut allergy. She insisted her plan was just to serve me a bad dessert and that she had no other motives. I find that hard to believe, but regardless, it's not my fault that I ended up in the ER because of her idea of a prank. It was her plan, and now she has to face the consequences. I've told Jeff about the emails, and he's tried to talk to her, but she continues to email me every few hours. In her latest message, she tried to guilt-trip me, saying she's far from home and needs the money because she's too exhausted from college to work. She claimed I'm her only hope to fix the situation and begged me to help. To be honest, I don't really want to get involved and risk ruining our honeymoon. At the same time, I feel a bit bad for her. If it was indeed a prank, it backfired terribly with serious consequences. I'm torn and feel like a bad person for not wanting to discuss with Jeff about possibly giving his daughter money when she returns to college. Update 1. Hi, so I followed the advice most of you gave me and stopped reading the emails from Addison. I've been focusing on enjoying our honeymoon instead. It's been 24 hours since I made the original post, and the majority of comments suggested I stop reading her emails if they're upsetting me. That makes sense. I can't change the situation, and I don't want to feel guilty for something that isn't my responsibility. I owe it to myself to enjoy this holiday, so that's what I'm going to do. I also talked to Jeff about the emails, and he agreed that I made the right choice by ignoring them. Continuously reading them would only make me feel worse about the situation. I can't change what happened, and I can't change his decision either. He's confident that his actions are the right ones, and Addison really needs to mature. She's in college now, and there's no excuse for this behavior anymore. She's not a teenager who can't control her emotions. I believe she's had plenty of opportunities to talk to me and clear the air, but she hasn't taken them, and that's not my responsibility. I don't need to feel guilty about any of this. I'm just going to focus on enjoying my vacation. I've worked hard for the past few years, and Jeff and I have earned this break. Update 2. Hi, Jeff and I are back from Egypt, and when we got home this afternoon, we found out that Addison was waiting for us. She had never returned to college after being sent back from Egypt. She had been at our house all along, having access to the spare keys, and lived there by herself for the past few days while waiting for us to come back. When we got home, Addison was quite at ease, watching TV in the living room. She didn't seem surprised to see us back and greeted us as if it were no big deal. This time I was in a much better state of mind than the last time she saw me in the ER, so I decided to address the situation. I told her that I didn't feel safe around her, wasn't comfortable with her staying with us, and that she needed to return to college. I pointed out that Jeff was paying for her education and she was wasting that money by staying home while we were away. I made it clear that I didn't want her there and told her to leave. Instead of responding to me, she completely ignored what I said and went straight to Jeff. She told him that she didn't care about anything else, insisting that he couldn't just cut her off and stop paying for her expenses over a stupid prank. She tried to emotionally manipulate him, saying that she was his only daughter and the only family he had, so he couldn't just abandon her. I saw Jeff starting to soften, so I intervened, reminding him that her prank had sent me to the ER, and I was unsure if it was entirely innocent. Given her history, she was capable of doing it on purpose and then trying to cover it up. I didn't want to say this out loud, but she left me with no other choice. I didn't want to drive a wedge between them, but her behavior was extremely disrespectful. She apologized, but her actions after I returned from the trip didn't make that apology seem genuine. When I hinted that she might have intentionally sent me to the ER with her prank, she finally turned to face me. She was very angry and insisted that if she had really wanted to harm me, she would have chosen something much worse. She claimed she wouldn't have alerted the hotel authorities or called an ambulance. She would have just let me suffer longer. Her response sounded disturbingly psychopathic, and I told her that was exactly why I didn't trust her anymore and didn't want her living with us. I told her she had grossly abused the trust her father had placed in her. I had tried to be kind to her for years, but she showed no regard for anyone's emotions, which was why she was behaving this way. Things got heated, and we were arguing when she suddenly got in my face and shoved me. It wasn't a hard push, but I took a few steps back. That's when Jeff stepped in and told her he'd had enough and that she needed to leave. She had already put my life in danger once, and he wasn't going to let it happen again. She started accusing him of prioritizing me over his own daughter, and he told her he was just doing the right thing, plain and simple. Their argument escalated, with her calling him various names, but eventually she packed her bags and left, looking more angry than sad. It's been a couple of hours since then, and Jeff and I are unpacking and trying to process everything. It's very upsetting what's happening with Addison because at the end of the day she's just a teenager, and I do feel bad for her. But I can't ignore the fact that she pushed me today, and she had already sent me to the ER once. As Jeff says, it's not going to happen again. We're not going to entertain or encourage this behavior anymore. She'll need to look out for herself now, as we've given her enough opportunities to change and become a better person. Update 3. It's been a week since we returned from our honeymoon, and today, Jeff told me that Addison sent him an email saying she would drop out of college, unless she continued receiving money from him every month, like she was used to. She claimed everything was getting too stressful for her and she couldn't handle it anymore. This situation is becoming really complicated. While Jeff wants to punish her, he also doesn't want her to drop out of college and ruin her life. I'm at a loss for what to say because this is really tough. I don't like Addison anymore. She's been mean to me and has done a lot of hurtful things. But at the same time, I don't want her to fail in life. I definitely wouldn't want that for anyone. It feels like she's trying to manipulate Jeff into giving in, threatening to ruin her life if he doesn't continue to support her financially. I believe she could easily find a job to support herself, but she's not interested in that. Her college tuition is still covered by Jeff, so her main concern should be her miscellaneous expenses. She doesn't even need to worry about rent since her college provides on-campus accommodation. It's pretty straightforward for her. She just needs to either live frugally and get a part-time job or continue to complain. I don't have much to say about this situation, but Jeff is really stressed out. Honestly, I'm just annoyed with the way Addison is acting. She's making everything so difficult for everyone, and it doesn't need to be this hard. It feels like she's not happy unless there's some sort of problem. I don't know what to say anymore. I'm just really frustrated with her behavior. She really needs to grow up and start thinking like an adult instead of throwing temper tantrums over every little thing. It's getting old. Update 4. I talked with Jeff about the email Addison sent, and we decided to respond to her, letting her know that we would support whatever decision she makes. However, we made it clear that we won't be financially supporting her if she chooses to drop out. She's 18 now and legally an adult. Also, she hasn't lived with us for months since she's been at college. If she tries to come back home, we'll have her reported for trespassing, and she won't be allowed to live with us. Addison now has two options. She can either continue with college, accept the consequences of her actions, and get a part-time job to support herself, essentially choosing to grow up, or she can drop out and face the hard reality of being out of a place to live and out of our lives for good. Jeff has made it clear that he won't entertain this kind of behavior anymore. She's been trying to emotionally manipulate him, and it's becoming really nasty. We are okay with this situation as it stands. We don't have to bend over backward for her. Jeff was getting really tired of the drama, so this was the only option that made sense to us. We sent her an email a couple of hours ago and are now waiting for her response. I have no idea what she'll say, but she might try to blame me and act like it was all my idea. In reality, it was Jeff's decision. The only thing I suggested was that he should go ahead with it because she really needs to grow up. Ultimately, this is for her own betterment. Update 5. It's midnight, and we just received an email from Addison. She's decided to stay in college and get a part-time job. She expressed disappointment over Jeff's tone and mentioned that she never expected her own father to be against her. The email was full of manipulative tactics, which I don't even want to delve into because she's clearly trying to play the victim, and we're all too familiar with that game now. The main point is that our strategy seems to have worked. She's staying in college and will face the consequences of her actions. Jeff and I are just going to try to put this behind us and enjoy the rest of our honeymoon. It's been a stressful few days, and we're determined to have some fun. We deserve a break from all this.